The big brains on stage have pointed out that there are several empty seats up there. If you don't mind people looking at you, you're more than welcome to come join them in the awkwardness of being on stage with all the eyes on you. How are we doing, Lisa? Do we have any more? Okay, fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this celebration of life for what I feel comfortable saying is for all of our oldest friend that we've ever had at 103 and a half. And I think that half is really important for toddlers and anyone over the age of 102, that we make sure that we note that 103 and a half. As I mentioned earlier, please make those cell phones quiet as we proceed. My name is Chip Culpepper, and for better or worse, you are my victims for the next few minutes as I serve as the MC for this auspicious gathering. You may be wondering, how did this guy get this gig? I'm president. It's the honor of my life to be president of the 100th Bomb Group Foundation. Known to history, the 100th Bomb Group is known to history as the Bloody 100th. Lucky was one of the original members of that group when they formed and went overseas in 1943. He was the last of those original men who went over. And as of Monday, we now only have 3 surviving veterans of that unit in its entirety. All 3 of them were replacement crewmen. And oddly enough, of the 4 final survivors of the unit, all 4 were former combat air crew. And that is a remarkable accomplishment in a group that was, as I said, known as the Bloody 100th. My job here today is simply this. I hope to give you permission to laugh and cry and have all the feelings that all of us have. I can't believe that Laney asked me to serve in this role, because among the 100th, I'm kind of known as the guy who cries. Mark, is that a fair statement?
That's why we picked you.
That is a fair statement. So I will get choked up. It is inevitable. My daughter was living testament to that. She knows to always bet the under on how long it's going to take for me to cry. Our deep gratitude and condolences to the entire family, Laney and Rick, Richmond and John, and the rest of family Luckadoo. We are so honored to be here with you and to celebrate our dear friend's life. With us today, we have several dignitaries that I will name here, and you will hear from a few of them later as this program progresses. With us today, Lieutenant General John Campbell, United States Air Force retired. General Campbell. Major General Jason R. Armagost, Commander, 8th Air Force and Joint Global Strike Operations Center, and his spouse, Diane. Colonel Trey Morris, United States Air Force retired, and his spouse, Melody. Colonel Brian Biggs, my apologies, 8th Air Force. Lieutenant Colonel Matt Zeman, Instructor, Air Command Staff College. Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel Keith Manry. Mr. Scott Lair, President and CEO, National Museum of the Mighty 8th Air Force. Mr. John O'Neill, past chairman of the museum and a trustee there, and his spouse, Sue. Mr. Kevin Maurer, author of Damn Lucky. Tim Mallard, CEO of Forefront Living, our host here at Presbyterian Village. And we are truly grateful to Presbyterian Village for hosting us in this beautiful venue, Lucky's home for so many years. So, ladies and gentlemen, today's celebration and ceremony will be conducted as an outdoor ceremony. All military members should don their covers, and all former military members feel free to salute. Please rise and face the flag. To honor America, Colonel Brian Biggs, 8th Air Force, will come forward to sing our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, all the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
You may be seated. Chaplain Manry.
I invite you to join me, if you feel so led, in an attitude of prayer. Almighty and gracious God, we gather this afternoon to honor the life and legacy of Major John Lucky Luckadoo. We thank you for the years you gave him, for the courage with which he served our nation, and for the influence his story continues to have on all who hear it. As we remember him today, let this ceremony be more than tribute. Let it be a reminder to each of us that freedom is costly, sacrifice is sacred, and legacy is meant to be carried forward. We ask your blessing on his family, his daughter and son-in-law, his grandchildren and great-grandchildren, his nieces and nephew. Surround them with comfort and peace. Bless those who will speak, that their words may bring honor to his memory and strength to all who listen. Be present among us now, O Lord, and let gratitude and reverence mark all that is said and done. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
In 2016, the lovely Bobby Luckadoo noticed me standing in the buffet line at my first mini reunion of the 100th Bomb Group Foundation in Palm Springs. She came over to me and she said, "Young man, you look lost. Come join our table." And without either of us knowing it, she put in motion the fact that I'm now president of this foundation. And she was a remarkable matchmaker because at that same table were two future fellow board members, and Matt Mabe and Chris Barrett with his wife Laura, as well as Phil Sampanero, historian, and of course, Lucky, who introduced himself as Bobby's first husband of 70 years. Over the ensuing decade, I've had the true, unique privilege of accompanying Lucky on several trips. And as his traveling companion, as Phil knows, and if Bunker Hill is here, knows, I felt the incredible weight of neither losing nor damaging a national treasure. He made it a real pleasure. Now, you might find it amusing, especially those of you on stage, to learn that Lucky always used his trusty wristwatch to time down to the second every takeoff of every flight that we took together. And he sat silently judging the pilot on how well he did. Now, once upon a particularly bumpy landing, he leaned over to me and whispered, "He must have let the co-pilot land that one." As you might expect, everywhere we went, whether boarding an airplane or simply sitting in a restaurant or in a hotel lobby, people wanted to meet him. They wanted to talk to him, and they were always claiming a new friend in the old man that they had just met. But what they didn't know, and unless you were sitting in the seat next to him, is that he wanted to meet them too. He wanted to engage in conversation with a curious 8-year-old girl at the boarding gate. And always the gentleman from Chattanooga, he did not avoid shaking hands with strangers in restaurants who were just seeking a photo with him, even though his hands, when he finished, hurt even more than they did before, and he never let them know that. I was more than happy on many occasions to ask people to come back, maybe after he'd had a bite of food, because he would not stop eating or start eating as long as someone wanted to meet him. I tried in vain, and I told this to Laney this morning, I tried in vain to teach that man a new vocabulary word. No. And he never learned the lesson. His quick wit, personal warmth, and undeniable charm endeared him to everyone he met. I watched him in Los Angeles at the premiere of Masters of the Air meet celebrities like Austin Butler and Callum Turner and Bo Derek, who made a beeline to him. And yes, even still, Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, who sought him out in the crowd, and they hung captivated on his every word. And the same thing happened in D.C. at that premiere, only it was 2-, 3-, and 4-star generals who lined up to meet him. Lucky was always the same in everywhere he went and with everyone he met, famous or not. He was genuinely curious and interested in others as they were in him. In my cherished time with him on the road, I learned a lot from him. We talked about how the decision by higher command to replace the original co-pilots of the 100th Bomb Group with Lucky and his equally inexperienced flight school classmates unquestionably contributed to that bloody 100th moniker that they earned. How could it not? We talked about current events and how he saw ominous ripples of history repeating itself. We talked about family. I told you.
We're on schedule.
He loved my daughter, Anna, and she adored him. And they both lit up at the sight of one another. He admired my son Conley for taking on a modern military service as a fellow aviator. And I'm so happy that both of my children knew and loved him. I believe that Lucky understood the heavy burden that we extended upon him as a proxy grandfather and proxy father for all of us who have lost ours. He became the de facto face and voice, that voice, of all the veterans we've lost. That was a tremendous burden and weight to bear, yet he took it with great dignity and he carried it like he did everything else. I asked him once what the secret was to that long life, and he smiled that little smile, and he said, "Really good scotch." And then he added, "Plus, I always like to have something to look forward to." That is wisdom. That is the lesson we take from Lucky Luckadoo. Always have something to look forward to. That's how you get to 103 and a half. So, when we wrap up in here, you're invited by our host to join in the lobby in some really good scotch. And there will be a toast that will be delivered at that time. So you probably remember the hat, only this isn't his hat. This is my dad's hat. It's from 1993, the reunion in Little Rock, where the first time I was ever in a room with Lucky Luckadoo and didn't know it, because there were 600 of those men in that room. 600. Who wore it better? No, I won't put it on. I'm honored by the family to let you know that you can honor Lucky by making a contribution, if you'd like to, a memorial contribution to the 100th Bomb Group Foundation. And you can do that in a couple of ways. 100th Bomb Group or 100thbg.com, or it's probably easier, I discussed this earlier, to go to luckyluckadoo.com. You can remember that one, luckyluckadoo.com, and follow the link there that will lead you back to 100th Bomb Group. So with that, I will introduce the first of our dignitaries here. Who writes a book when they're 98? Lucky Luckadoo. And you do it with style, because you get a call and you make friends and you meet the New York Times best-selling author, Kevin Maurer, who takes on your project. So, ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Maurer.
It's an interesting story how this came about. I actually saw him in a Q&A, and I just cold called him and said, hey, I want to read your book. Like, where can I get it? And he said, I don't have a book. And I said, we're going to fix that. And so I went about at that point trying to convince him to let me do this. And had some help. The 100th Bomb Group helped a lot. Mike Faley helped a lot, the historian here. And eventually he let me do it. But I never met Lucky in person until after the book was done. It was a 300-page book, turned into the editors, ready to be published. We knew it was going to come out. The first time I flew down to Dallas to meet him in person, we were at a museum. But it was like meeting an old friend. He and I spent the whole COVID lockdown every day, Monday through Friday, for 1 hour on the phone, and we talked through his whole life, from the beginning as a child all the way to when he got out of the Air Force. But these weren't like fun conversations, right? At first they were, going, but we got into the depths of what it was like to climb into that cockpit 25 times and face the Luftwaffe. And I never settled for the easy answer. So he at first, he didn't trust me, and he would give me I jumped in there, we flew over there, we bombed, we came back. And I'd say, all right, stop right there, let's go back. And I'd say, what was in your left pocket? What did that smell like when that happened? What did it feel like when the flak was hitting and you were holding it? And sooner or later, he slowly took us there. And that's why the book works at the end of the day. He had the courage to go back to some of the worst memories he's ever had and share them with me on a phone. He's never even seen me, and get to the depth of that. And one of the big questions I had to him from the beginning was, why? After the first time, why did you go back in that cockpit? And he said, Kevin, I made a commitment. I put myself in that seat, and I was going to fulfill my commitment. So midway through these interviews, though, he calls me, and I had warned him this might happen. He says, I can't do another week of this. I need about 2 weeks off to just, decompress a little bit. And so at that point, I was convinced the book was dead, because I had a half of it. We didn't really have what I needed. And so I started working on that. He took 2 weeks off, and I was the fool, because he had committed to the book. He just needed 2 weeks off. And so on the dot, 2 weeks, that Monday, I remember calling him up thinking, when he tells you he can't do it, You'll be disappointed, but it's okay. It's like, this is an important, this is this man's life you're trying to tell. And he said, he just got right into it. He said, I think we stopped on this chapter, I forgot which one, and he just went right into it. And to his credit, we got a book that I think, when we first started talking about this project, and I think the reason why I think it's connected with people is that we didn't tell the story of the planes. We told the story of the men who went into harm's way. Damn Lucky is a book about service. It's about commitment. It's about friendship. And to me, the book was always about an everyday hero that answered the call. And that's what I was hoping to get across. And he helped me do that by opening up and telling me a story and trusting me to get it across the page. But he trusts, like, Ronald Reagan. It's trust but verify. Like, he wanted to see the pages, right? It was. And I remember the first time sending him pages, how nervous I was. I haven't been that nervous in a long time. And they came back with good notes. I mean, look, writing's rewriting. But I do remember he and I initially would go back and forth. My idea for the structure of the book was I wanted to just do the Bremen mission. And anybody who's read the book knows that mission is sort of the pinnacle, the climax of the book. I didn't want to take the reader out of the plane. I just wanted you to get in the plane, fly the mission, and we would go back and fill in where we needed to. And he's like, Kevin, that's not going to work. And I was like, I've done a couple of these, man. I know what I'm doing. I got this. So I started the book that way. I sent him initial pages, and he wrote back, and it's like, it's not working. And he was right, and I had to redo it, and we did the structure he wanted. So it may be my name on the cover, but Lucky absolutely helped write this book. Not only did he live it and tell it, but from the cover to everything, this was as much his book. It was more his book than my book, and it was an honor to me to help him get it on the page and to capture these feelings. I'll leave you last thing. I've got this great memory real quick, and it speaks to something that we talked about earlier. I've got a young son, and we went down to Savannah to the 8th Air Force Museum, and there's a bomber there, and Lucky. And it was like, hey, we're going to go in the bomber, and we're going to show you this thing. And he climbs into this bomber. He's got to be, 101? Like he's 20. I think I went the easy way, and he climbed in underneath the cockpit. We met him in the cockpit. My youngest son, he was 11 at the time, sat down in the co-pilot seat. And he and Lucky went through the whole thing. This is what you do. Here's this what this does. When the Luftwaffe comes, here's how you scan. This is what I need you to do. I'm the pilot. You're the co-pilot. Afterward, when we go through, I'm sort of astonished by this. My son then climbs down into the kind of bombardier underneath, and he's sitting in the seat, and he looks back at me and he says, "We could have flown a mission if they had any fuel in this thing." I'll leave you with this. I'm thankful for every minute I got to spend with him, and we, from the phone calls to the dinners. To getting notes on things I had made mistakes on. I loved every minute of it, and I'm thankful for every minute I spent. But most of all, I'm thankful that he considered me a friend, because I always felt like I was the lucky one.
So the 100th Bomb Group was part of a much larger Air Force, the 8th Air Force, flying out of England. And Masters of the Air captured a lot of that and tried to associate all the things that were happening. And one of the characters in Masters of the Air is a gentleman named Harry Crosby, who was one of our esteemed veterans. And his daughter, Rebecca, posted online, and it's been an outpouring online. And she said something like, my dad's been gone a while, and knowing Lucky kept him close. And that is part of why losing him is so hard, is she's losing a bit of her closeness with her father now. I have a message here that I was asked to deliver on behalf of the trustees and volunteers at Thorpe Abbott's. That was the base that the 100th Bomb Group flew out of in England. Today it is the home of the 100th Bomb Group Memorial Museum. And from the trustees and volunteers, The 100th Bomb Group Memorial Museum at Thorpe Abbott sends its condolences to the family on this sad occasion. All that met him were struck by his warmth, humility, and intelligence. He spent only a very small part of his long life at Thorpe Abbott's, but as for many of those young men that served here, the trauma and memory of those days would be with him for the rest of his life. Lucky served his country well, and the British people have much to thank Lucky and his comrades for. There would have been times when he could not have imagined living to 103. And it is our good fortune that he did, and he was able to tell the story of the 100th to new generations and to help keep the memory of the 100th alive. Everyone here at the museum who met him will not forget the experience. Watching him leave his wheelchair and insist on climbing to the top of the tower, unaided at 101, will be the memory that none of us who saw it will ever forget. Rest in peace, Lucky, assured that we at the museum will continue to do our best to ensure your service and sacrifice and that of the 100th are not forgotten. Another museum that is not forgotten is the National Museum of the Mighty 8th Air Force near Savannah. And Lucky meant a lot to all of us, but he also meant a lot to the museum, and I invite John O'Neill to share a few moments.
Oh, thank you, Chip, and good afternoon to everyone. It's my pleasure to absolutely be here with everyone. As Chip said, my name is John O'Neill, and I represent the National Museum of the Mighty 8th Air Force in Pooler, Georgia, which is right outside Savannah. Also the birthplace of the Mighty 8th Air Force in Savannah. On January 28th, 1942, the 8th Air Force had their orders of incorporation that basically said, you have a job to do to kill the Luftwaffe and through strategic bombing destroy the Nazi war effort. And with 7 men and no planes, it all started. And that 8th Air Force is still flying today, proud, the greatest Air Force the world has ever seen. So I'm very proud on behalf of our museum and our Board of Trustees, our CEO, Scott Lair, who's here, his staff, all the museum volunteers that make the Mighty 8th come to life every day to tell the stories, to extend our heartfelt and deepest condolences to Lucky's family, and especially to Lainey. We all knew Lucky as Lucky. She knew him as Papa. So thank you, Lainey, for inviting us to be here today. I'd like to share just a few moments of reflection about what it was like to know Lucky as a friend. My friendship with Lucky began in 2013. Though others know him far longer than I do, some of you in this room, I quickly understood why he was so beloved. His passing leaves a deep ache, a severe void. It's hard to put into words. My wife Susan and I have spent the past few days remembering events and conversations, the laughter, looking at pictures and videos that we have on our phone, and the quiet reflections of time we spent with Lucky. When Lucky would visit the National Museum of the Mighty 8th Air Force, he had a presence like no other. Visitors lined up just to meet him, to hear his stories, to shake his hand, to take a picture, often to thank him, not only for his service, but he was a living representative of the 350,000 men that wore the 8th Air Force patch on their shoulder during World War II. People just loved him. He never wanted to disappoint anyone, like Chip said. He would go for hours. We would tell Lainey, we've got to stop him, Lainey. We got to get him some rest. No, Lucky kept going as if he was on a mission. He had to fly the mission as briefed, he would say. But Kevin Mauer's book, I remember, people lined up outside the museum looking to get Lucky and Kevin's signature on that book when it was launched. So it was just one of those special things. You know, like Chip had earlier said, my only regret is that he was so soft-spoken. I kind of wished he would maybe take a Toastmasters course. But he never did. But when I think back to the 100th Bomb Group reunions at our museum, where his presence lit up the room, and I would say lit up the town. To the annual museum gala, he would come in his tuxedo, and people would be lined up to get a picture with Lucky. Everybody wanted to shake his hand, and everybody wanted to just listen to him talk. But I think there's 3 big events I want to share with you that really touched my soul. The first one was in 2021, our museum launched a Memorial Day weekend to put the memorial back in Memorial Day. And that's where we bought 26,000 World War II era 48 star flags, and we placed, with community effort and volunteers, all 26,000 in our memorial garden in the back of our museum to represent the 26,000 young 8th Air Force people, Lucky's comrades, that never came home during World War II. And Lucky and 3 other veterans planted the last 4 flags, and that was such a special moment. And then the 8th Air Force flew a B-52 over the garden in tribute and just wiggled its wings a little bit. It was pretty quick, but it wiggled. I asked Lucky later that evening, do you mind telling me, look, when you were planting that flag, what were you thinking about? He says, I was thinking of my dearest friend, Flight Lieutenant Leroy Means Sullivan, Sully Sullivan from Chattanooga, who had joined the Royal Canadian Air Force. Lucky wanted to join the Royal Canadian Air Force, but his father wouldn't sign off. And from that conversation started a bunch of museum volunteers, Jeff Johnson and Julie and Scott and several of us, Mike Faley got involved, and we decided to do something to bring a little piece of Sully back to the museum, and that was the Sully Sullivan plaque, and we wanted Lucky to dedicate it. So donors and volunteers, we put a plaque to bring Flight Lieutenant Sullivan, even though he flew with the Royal Canadian Air Force, back to the 8th Air Force Museum where he could be honored every year. And that was a lasting tribute that just finished up this past October, October 2024, when, through the efforts of Mark Copeland, who runs our tours, got soil from Sully's grave in Brookwood Cemetery in UK, in England, and brought it home so that Lucky and Laney could place that soil on his mother's grave, Nellie's grave, so that her boy was finally home. And I will tell you, that was one of the most touching moments I've ever experienced in my life. And I know those that were in attendance there too. So a little piece of Sully's home, and I know it meant the world to Lucky too. Like I said, 2 more things real quick. I was incredibly proud to have the opportunity to travel, as Lucky was our guest of the museum, to go back to England at 101. And Mark Copeland took him, and my wife and I went, as well as several people that had signed up for that remarkable tour. And we got Lucky over there. 80 years to the day, he was at Thorpe Abbott's for that mission he left for Bremen. Interesting enough, that was Lucky's 22nd mission. That was my father's crew's first. They were flying in the 95th Bomb Group above Lucky. And I remember talking to my dad's ball turret gunner, George Moffett. I said, what was that like? He said, that was my first combat mission. And if that was combat, I don't want any part of it, as they were looking down at the 100 that Lucky was flying in, getting beat up by the Luftwaffe and flak. The experiences that we had there is, on the day everybody was in London, Mark asked Lucky if he'd like to go to Sully's grave. So we took a private bus and we drove down with Laney and Rick, myself and Mark, Lucky, and we got to go to Sully's grave at Brookwood Cemetery. Lucky was last there on November 11th, 1943. Almost 80 years to the date, he went right up to the grave and talked to his dear friend Lucky. It was a moment I'll never forget and one that I always cherish. If you'd ever read Kevin's book, you know about Sully, and you know about the love and devotion that those 2 friends had. To Lucky, the word hero always belonged to his fallen comrades. They were the real heroes, he would say. I was just a lucky survivor. But to all of us, he was very much a hero in how he lived, and how he remembered, and how he inspired. These are the things real heroes do, and that was Lucky. Lucky was also deeply committed in later years to honoring the home front. He wanted to make sure that people knew that if it wasn't for the home front heroes, he called them, we would have never won that war, and that we need to have a day to recognize them. And that's something that we still pursue to this day. There were also many lighter moments. There were moments with Johnny Walker Black in a hotel room after a long day, sipping scotch. He told us about the Black Velvet, a drink that him and Sully had in London that was smooth as glass. So we tried that, champagne and Guinness, and it was smooth, but it also hurt the next day. There were countless stories of him, so many. I hope to see you later, but time won't permit me. But the last thing I'll say is my special moments at the museum was when, like Kevin said, Lucky would climb into that cockpit, up through the nose, right? Get into that pilot seat. Laney was with him, Rick was with him, John was with him, Ben was with him, several family members, and he would take you through every gauge, every lever, every trim tab, every switch, light, and button on that plane, like he was flying it in 1943. It was simply amazing. So I cherish those very special moments he spent with his family. And there was no doubt, if there was fuel in the engines, he would have started that thing up and taxied it out onto I-95 and flown it around for a while. I think our museum's special to Lucky because Lucky knew that as our veterans leave us, and there's so few left, that the Mighty Eighth needed a place, a repository for the memorabilia, the exhibits, the papers, the diaries, where people could go and learn about what it was like to fly in those early days and to continue to fly today. Our mission is to bring it all forward to current day. It's the 8th Air Force Museum, the only one in the world. And Lucky hated war. He would constantly tell us it was folly, it was futility, nothing gets solved. But he also believed deeply in remembering the sacrifice. Susan and I count ourselves very fortunate. We count ourselves the damn lucky ones to have known Major John Lucky Luckadoo. His life, his friendship, his humility, and courage have left an imprint that will never fade. We are forever grateful in the journey of life that our paths had crossed with Lucky. All of us at the National Museum of the Mighty 8th Air Force cherished our times with Lucky, and I know Lucky cherished his times with us. At the museum, we often say, they saved the world, we save their stories. Please know Lucky's story and the stories of all who served with him will forever be preserved, honored, memorialized, and remembered at the museum he loves so dearly. Blue skies, our dear friend, thank you for defending the freedoms we enjoy today. We will continue the mission from here. We love you, Lucky. Rest in peace.
Thanks, John. We posted news of Lucky's passing on social media, which he loved social media so much. We posted that on Tuesday morning, and I checked with Matt Mabe on my drive down here from Little Rock this morning, and as of about, I don't know, it was probably about 11 o'clock, 1.1 million interactions, likes, shares, comments had been made to that one post. And that was just the foundation's post. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of friends who've put their own posts. So I know right now online we are streaming this live. We have viewers all around the world who are joining us in mourning. And although he despised social media and having people know exactly what he was doing, and they told me what I was wearing at dinner. He would, I think, be duly impressed by the following that he has today. I want to quickly point out a couple of people, although I know there are lots of people who are watching us online right now who would love to be here. There are fellow board members of mine from the 100th Bomb Group Foundation. Gary Christopher is here with us, and Mike Faley is here. And there are several other members of the 100th Bomb Group Foundation family who are with us. So if you want to learn more about the foundation, please talk to us. We'd love to tell you all about all of that. We've talked a lot about Masters of the Air as well. I have a comment here that is tied directly to that by one of those people who wishes he could be here. Mr. Kirk Sadusky, who's an executive with Playtone and a producer of Masters of the Air, sent us the following message. There was a time when young men risked their lives to save the world. John was part of that effort. We don't need to romanticize it. John certainly didn't. He just helped accomplish it. I got to know John a bit because of Masters of the Air. After not seeing him for a while, we met at a promotional event. I was thrilled to see him, but wasn't sure he'd even remember my name. but he did. It was one of the greatest honors of my life. America and the world benefited from the luck of the draw. One of those Masters of the Air's premieres was for the active duty 8th Air Force, and it was held at Barksdale Air Force Base. And I will tell a story when I introduce Major General Armagost in a moment about that premiere that I hope he hasn't court-martialed a couple of people over. But before we move into that part of the story, we've talked a lot about John's military service, but as John O'Neill said, he was Papa, and the family mourns a family man. So it is my true honor to turn the podium over to his son-in-law, Dr. Rick Abbott.
Thank you, Chip. Thank you all for being here and helping us remember Lucky. He was truly a great man, and I feel so lucky to have been his son-in-law. Before I start, though, I want to take a moment just to thank the people at PVN. The family knows how special the relationship was with him and the people here, both the residents and the workers. Lucky loved it here and felt very secure. His life was richer because of you. And you all made that last month of his life for letting me so much easier. We just thank you all from the bottom of our hearts. It was such a special experience for us. I'm sure that it will not surprise you to hear that Lucky was our family's patriarch. He was our family's patriarch. His quiet, unpretentious confidence, typical of his generation's war veterans, made him a wonderful guide as we navigated our life experiences. What better source for moral, financial, and everyday advice on how we should navigate our life's experiences? Lucky's sense of responsibility to himself, his family, and his community made him a powerful role model for us. He never had a dress-down day. He always appeared as if he had been groomed by a dress sergeant. He exuded self-respect. His life was incredibly organized, with everything having its place. God pity the person that forgot to put the car keys back on the hook in the kitchen. If missing, there would be a quiet statement of annoyance, and immediately we would feel as if we were a young child racing through the kitchen door, all muddy, to be greeted by a horrified mother's stare at us. There was no vainness in Lucky. He could always be approached with ease and comfort for advice, and he would never hesitate to seek out advice from members of his family who had the experience and the knowledge that he needed. Lucky showed interest in our lives and was always stood ready to help. He knew that there might be times of stress, and he was always prepared for them to help us. He would find a way to ask if he could help without imposing a sense of interference or of inadequacy. We all know of Lucky's profound sense of obligation to his community, and this too was a model to his family. Shortly after moving to Dallas, he and Bobby joined Dallas's Committee for Foreign Visitors, and in 1972 he joined Dallas Taping for the Blind. He became a valued member for both organizations and rose to prominent roles of leadership. He and Bobby moved here in 1972, moved here later to Preston Village, or Presbyterian North Village, and he took on roles of responsibility here. He became the president of the PVN's Village Council, and a member of PVN's Board of Trustees. But we'll all remember him for his deep and seemingly accelerating commitment to educate children and adults about his generation's experiences and sacrifices during World War II. It was his hope that by doing so, his lessons would reduce the likelihood for further wars. His feeling of obligation to do this, reinforced by his wife's insistence of its importance, grew in him over the past few years, and he spent much of his time preparing and delivering presentations and interviews locally, nationally, and at times internationally. His last interview for a documentary in production took place just days before his last hospitalization. These efforts must have worked, because as you just heard, over 1 million people have sought out information about him or to listen to him read about his last missions in the Damn Lucky book. Lucky's impact on his family was profound and has left us with a sense of responsibility to ourselves, our family, and our community. This will not fade. We were indeed lucky to have Lucky's guidance for our lives. Thank you.
I've told Laney countless times, thank you for sharing your father with all of us. We truly are the better for it. So back to that Barksdale premiere. Not everyone in the room is as familiar with military hierarchy as everybody else, so let me give you a kind of a rundown here. Lucky was a major. Major General Armagost has got 2 stars. There's a lot of room between those two things. There's Lieutenant Colonel and then Brigadier General and then a 2-star general. The last thing a 2-star general told a couple of colonels who were walking Major Luckadoo out to look at a B-52 that he really wanted to go look at, I heard Major General Armagost say, "Gentlemen, first deck only." The next thing I knew, 3 stories up in the air, leaning out the cockpit window, is a 102-year-old John Lucky Luckadoo that I'm in charge of. And this is the moment where I thought, I've broken or lost a national treasure. Because how the hell did he get up there, and how are they going to get him out? And naturally, he came right back down the ladder, and I hope that those 2 gentlemen were not disciplined in any way, because they were just following the orders of a major. As were you. We all know our place. Ladies and gentlemen, Major General Jason Armagost.
Thanks, Chip. I think it's a little unfair that, you tell stories that make people cry and I have to sit in a spotlight. It's not fair. So I did meet Lucky when he was 102 years old. And I did say that. I said, we cannot, it is incredibly, if you've been inside the B-17, it's very similar. Moving around in an airplane's cockpit, in a military airplane's cockpit, is very problematic on a good day. If you're not paying attention, you'll bump into things, you will hit your head, you will do all kinds of things. And the first indication I knew that Lucky went above the first deck was him sticking his head out of the window with a gigantic smile on his face, just like you all would recognize. And he was more invigorated doing that, I think. So it's not a surprise to anyone who knew Lucky. So I've been in the Air Force for 33 years, a little over 33 years. During that time, I have met presidents, vice presidents, kings of countries, secretaries general, too many four-star generals to count around the world. And I have never met anyone with as big a presence as Major John Luckadoo. Never. It has not happened. And I don't expect it will happen. Kevin, you did a marvelous job capturing the spirit of that man on the pages of a book, which is now a gift to all of us and our children and our families that we can share so that his reach spreads even farther. But I want to talk really quickly about what connects Major Luckadoo to the other military members in the audience here. So raise your hand if you served in any branch of the service. Raise it high, because I got to be able to see it. And my hearing is bad. Okay, that's okay. Now, if you're a family member of anyone, not just here, but anyone who has served in the military, any branch of the service, raise your hand. There you go. That's almost everyone, right? And I know if I said if you have a friend, everyone would raise their hand because they knew Lucky. I will tell you that after 33 years, the other thing that is very important to me, and I think it was very important to Lucky as well, is we talk about the service and sacrifice of the members, but I personally also, just like Lucky did, like to talk about the service and sacrifice of the families. So I want to thank you all. Okay, we also have a saying, so everyone who raised their hand to serve in the military took an oath. And that oath is actually what connects all of us across generations, all the way back. I took the same oath that Lucky did as an officer. The enlisted oath is very slightly different, but I want to briefly tell you what's different about the officer oath that Lucky took. He's to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. What's different on the enlisted oath is it says you are also to follow the orders of the president and the officers appointed over you. The officer oath does not have that. And so what it intentionally does is it gives those officers the responsibility and the accountability to lead and to not defy orders, but to have the moral courage to stand up and be something that the officers above them actually need them to be, and to confront when something isn't right. And my favorite story about Lucky is when he was a lieutenant, and he was chosen to lead as a lieutenant, as one of those original 100th Bomb Group members, above a major who was in a position who was failing. That is a representation of that oath and what that meant and what they saw at the time when Lucky was a first lieutenant, which is the same almost the same distance from major to major general. It's the same almost the same distance from first lieutenant to major. But they saw something special in Lucky because he had the moral courage to stand up and lead. And he never ceded that moral courage. I had the blessing to meet him when he was 102 years old, and I would have chosen him to lead one of my formations today. So, and we know, having been in the cockpit with him, that he would have done it. and he would have led them well. We also have a saying that leaders eat last. And so I'll leave you with this. I think it is only fitting that Lucky was the very last of those original 100th Bomb Group members to go, because Lucky is a leader, and he was the last to leave. So blessings to Lucky.
We are reaching a point where I'm going to encourage you, if you've got a Kleenex or if you've got a handkerchief, you might want to have that handy here in a minute. Every veteran knows that someday there will be a flag that is going to get presented to their family. They know that. It's going to drape their coffin. It's going to hang on the wall. It's going to be a cherished memento. But no veteran that I'm aware of ever gets to see that flag. It shows up after they're gone. That was not the case with John Lucky Luckadoo. And here to tell you more about that and this extraordinary flag that you will see here in a few minutes presented to Laney is Lieutenant Colonel Matt Zeman.
Laney, thank you for this opportunity, again, for sharing your dad. Chip, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you also for breaking the dam on getting choked up, because that way I won't be the first. Everybody's got stories about Lucky. I'd like to share two real quick and then tell you a different story related to him. I didn't know Lucky as long as most of you in here, but as we already talked about, the impact of that man and his character and his personality made you feel like you were a part of his family. I met him about a year and a half ago. I'm at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama, where Lucky entered the Air Corps in 1942. And I teach our leadership curriculum at Air Command and Staff College, a program for our majors. And in that curriculum, we talk about leading in crisis, leading in extremis, leading in combat, and Masters of the Air is one of the texts that we use. And I thought, what better way, instead of reading a book, to hear from the guy in his own words up on stage and to be able to meet somebody who flew into that hell in 1943 and 1944. So made a phone call, thanks to Trey Morris for actually brokering the initial connection, but invited Lucky out, and he jumped on the opportunity, said it's been about 75 years, plus or minus a year, since he had been at Maxwell, and it would be nice to see it again. But it almost didn't happen, not through Lucky, because of weather. So traveling with Phil Sampanaro, met up with Lucky in Dallas, and there was weather, pretty bad weather. And flights kept getting delayed, getting canceled, and we were looking at options, whether to fly into a different city, and the only hope we had, he was speaking the next morning, so there wasn't even an option the next morning. The only option we had was a flight that would get into Montgomery at about 11:30. And there were 17 people ahead of him on the standby list. Thought there's no way. This great effort, but it's not gonna happen. And Phil calls me at probably around 9 o'clock as they're boarding and says, "You're not gonna believe it. We made the flight." So Lucky held true to his word and his luck held out. He made that flight and he got off that plane at about 11:30, as happy as can be with a smile on his face, and declined the wheelchair and walked right out and introduced himself. And that was just the beginning of our friendship and relationship. And getting to drive around base with him where he had entered the service, it's changed quite a bit, but I still, to this day, whenever I drive around, I just think about what it was like when he was 20 years old, marching around in the parade field, barking out orders because he was the tallest guy in the formation. And one of the things we have at Maxwell is a giant prop and wings, just like the Air Corps members wore on their lapels. And it represents officer training. Aside from the Air Force Academy, all ROTC and officer training school cadets pass through Maxwell, either during summer field training or for their training if they're in officer training school. And they touch a plaque at the base of that prop and wings. And as we were driving Lucky around, he wanted to get out of the car and take a look at it. And he just walked up and read the plaque, as he casually does out of interest. And he just reached down and put his hand on that plaque that every other officer outside of the Air Force Academy has laid their hands on. That was a powerful moment. So one other quick story, Lucky became a repeat visitor with Maxwell, and the last visit with us was back in May as the Gathering of Eagles. It's a program we do to honor significant individuals who have had an impact in aviation. Lucky obviously fit that bill. And everybody ahead of him said, Lucky needs to be an Eagle, needs to be an Eagle. And I said, I know. And so we finally brought him out. The students had selected him. And he was sharing the stage with a number of other greats. And one of them was a gentleman named Andre Borschberg. He's a Swiss fighter pilot who flew a solar-powered airplane around the world and has the record for the longest solo nonstop flight. It's multiple days. He would sleep while he was flying in little bits and pieces. And Andre has now created an electric-powered airplane, battery-powered airplane, part of Clean Future. And Lucky said, yeah, I just love the chance to fly in that thing. So on VE Day of all days, out of pure coincidence, Lucky gets in a battery-powered airplane and flies with a Swiss fighter pilot. And Lucky took the controls, and when they landed, Andre said, he still got it. But going back to that first visit and the impact that Lucky has had, like Chip has said, there aren't many veterans left of the greatest generation of World War II, of the 8th Air Force, of the 100th Bomb Group. And I wanted to do something to honor him. And I felt the most fitting way on behalf of the airmen that follow his legacy, was to fly a flag, and not just any flag. And I thought it would be great if I could get the flag that eventually would be here today. And as Chip said, that's not common to get that ahead of time, and it was actually pretty difficult to get it. And what really sparked the idea, a B-17 was passing through Alabama, operated by the Commemorative Air Force. I'm a member of the Commemorative Air Force, and I thought, what an opportunity to get that flag flown on a B-17 in the state where he joined the Air Corps. So I flew it up there myself, out of Maxwell in my plane, met up with the B-17, flew on it there, and when Lucky visited us, he visited the Alabama Air National Guard that flies F-35s, the newest 5th generation advanced stealth fighter that we operate. And one of the gentlemen that showed him around the jet was Spock Ullman, who's also sitting up on stage, and asked if Spock would be willing to fly it. And he, of course, said, I would be honored. And he took it supersonic over the speed of sound in an F-35 out of Alabama as well. And you think about that transition in air power from an unpressurized B-17 to the sensor fusion and supersonic capability and stealth capability of an F-35, and I thought, wow, that just kind of brings it full circle. And I would love to take credit for the rest of this story, but I have to give credit to Spock, because Spock said, wouldn't it be great if we could get this flown in England with the 100th Air Refueling Wing, the modern incarnation of the Bloody 100th? I said, that's a fantastic idea. And thankfully, a good friend of mine was the wing commander out there, Ryan Garlow, who is also the step-grandson of an original Bloody 100th member. So being in command of the 100th was extremely special and personal for Ryan for many reasons. And Ryan, of course, jumped on that opportunity. So we got the flag out to him, and Ryan said, I'll do it one better. Lucky flew 25 missions with the 100th. We're going to fly 25 missions with the 100th in honor of Lucky. And every flight that it flew on was an operational air refueling mission, refueling NATO fighters, American bombers that were doing presence missions over in the European theater through the same skies and out of the same English ground where Lucky flew back during World War II. So the flag took a life of its own, and originally I didn't obviously want to tell Lucky, hey, this flag is going to be for after you pass. But so many hands had touched it, I wanted him to know that we were doing something special for him. So at the reunion of the 100th Bomb Group down in New Orleans in May, Colonel Garlow brought the flag over from England. It was a great opportunity for me to take a handoff and also to tell Lucky and Laney and the rest of the family and the rest of the 100th Bomb Group what had been done, because the flag also represents everything that every member of the 100th had done. And shortly before that, one of the greatest things about the Air Force is just the brotherhood and the camaraderie and the things that connect us all. And one of those is the fact that our dean is friends with General Armagost. And I said, hey, Sped, you think General Armagost would be willing to fly this on a current bomber? And within about an hour, we had an answer on that. I was like, of course. Well, General Armagost didn't just get it flown on one bomber. He had it flown on all 3 operational bombers in the inventory, a B-1, a B-2, and a B-52 that I'm sure Lucky wished he was flying. The B-2 was also leading a formation of an F-15, F-16, F-35, and an A-10 representing, and a B-1 and a B-52, almost the entirety of American air power, which was just amazing to fly on that whole triad representing all of the men and women of the modern 8th Air Force in honor of the original Titans, the Mighty 8th in World War II. And he did one better, and he had it flown on the very first B-21 Raider, which is the most advanced combat aircraft in the world, 6th generation stealth bomber, replacement for the B-2, that is still in classified flight testing. and it was flown on tail number 0001. So the story could end there, and it would be great, but it continued. Lucky, if you know his story, flew 24 of his combat missions with the 351st Bomb Squadron, which is now the 351st Air Refueling Squadron at Milton Hall. And he flew his 25th and final mission with the 350th Bomb Squadron, which is now the 350th Air Refueling Squadron based out of McConnell Air Force Base in Kansas. So we had the final Air Force mission flown on board a KC-135 from the 350th. So it flew its final Air Force mission on an Air Force aircraft with the same squadron that he flew his final combat mission with. I got the flag back none too late, just about a week ago. In fact, it flew the night that Lucky entered hospice care. And when I had one more mission to do with it. Bringing it back to Maxwell. Had the Maxwell Honor Guard folded, so it was nice and crisp and clean to bring it here today. And as the Honor Guard's folding it, I just asked them, can you fold this flag, for a World War II veteran? I'm gonna be presenting it tomorrow. And as we're folding, I started to tell them about Lucky and mentioned, flew with the 100th Bomb Group. And the Master Sergeant in charge of the detachment said, I just came from the 100th at Milton Hall. I know all about Lucky Luckadoo and the story of the 100th. Totally unplanned, but again, that brotherhood, that connection that we have as airmen. And last night, Chip had talked about how even that 8-year-old at a gate, at an airport, Lucky would stop and talk to her. And my daughters are testament to that. Lucky met my daughter when she was 8 years old, and he treated her like his own granddaughter. Every time we would talk, he would ask how the girls are doing, and he would always sign off by saying, tell the girls I love them. So last night, my daughter flew with me, carrying Lucky's flag over Maxwell. And its final flight was to fly 100 seconds over Maxwell between 350 and 351 for the 100th Bomb Group, 350th Bomb Squadron, 351st Bomb Squadron, and did one final touch and go on the field before carrying it here today. So the Airman's Creed that we all know says that we are faithful to a proud heritage, a tradition of honor, and a legacy of valor. And those aren't just words. Lucky is those words. He is the embodiment of them. It's been such an honor to get to know him, and such an honor to take a part in that flag, and for that flag to have crossed the globe and to have been carried by over 80 airmen. About 90 individuals have had their hands on that flag, either carrying it aloft or like the gentleman on stage who got it done, who were able to get it on board aircraft that I was not able to. And I'm glad that Lucky was able to see that flag, and I'm just honored that that flag could be here today. So thank you for the opportunity again, and I will turn it back over to Chip.
So we have one more obligation to Lucky. And I would ask Chaplain Man Ray to come back to the podium. As this will conclude today's ceremony. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of schedule. I knew I would screw something up. I knew it was going to happen. Chaplain.
Of everyone that's spoken to you today, I am the least deserving to be here. I was one of the majors at Air Command Staff College, and his story has inspired me and, we might say, reblued me. I had the privilege of interviewing him, of researching, of coming to his house twice, of sharing some Johnny Walker with him, and of spending that last week in very close contact with him in Alabama. I have a picture of him in my office, proudly displayed now, where he signed to my wonderful friend Keith. And when I put him on that airplane at Maxwell for the last time, I couldn't believe how I teared up. I wasn't quite sure why. The best way I could describe it is that I had studied history, but then history had touched me. I was told I only had a minute or two of comments, so I'm going to stick to them now. You called him lucky, but if you knew Major John Luckadoo, you knew that that word carried more than chance. He was a lucky college student out driving on a Sunday when the radio crackled the news of Pearl Harbor. In that instant, laughter died into silence, and his path was forever changed. He was called lucky, but the word carried a heavy meaning. In the formation, told to look to his left and his right, and that only 1 in 3 would return, he was that one. And for 8 long decades, he bore the burden of surviving, carrying the memory of those who did not. He was lucky to have a best friend named Sully, who you've heard about. Through luck, though that luck felt cruel the day he found only the wreckage of Sully's plane. And yet, at 102, he completed the circle, carrying earth from Sully's grave back to Tennessee to rest at Sully's mom's feet. He was lucky to carry a pocket Bible given by his mother on every flight. On one mission, it caught a piece of flak and saved his life. He never flew without it again. For Lucky, survival, I would suggest, was never mere fortune. It was providence. He was lucky in love, though it didn't start that way. On a blind date at the officers' club, he took one look at a young lady named Bobby and realized he had the wrong date. She was the one who would light up his life, the luckiest thing that ever happened to him, the one that allowed him to think of something other than what he saw in Europe, to think of a future. Before she died, she told him he couldn't stop telling the very story it took many years for him to begin sharing in the first place. And she was right, because every time he shared it, he came alive. He lit up in the presence of young people, passing the torch with as much joy in his eyes as there was in theirs. And he was lucky to live long enough to be surrounded by family. His bride, Bobby, for 71 years. A devoted daughter and son-in-law, 2 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren, 3 nieces, and a nephew. They were his treasure, his joy, and the proof that his legacy was more than missions flown. It was love passed down through generations. Yet isn't it striking that such a short part of his long life, the months he spent in combat, colored the whole of it? It is profound the way a single season can leave a lasting mark. That truth should inspire us to serve with courage and honor when we are called upon, to heed Lucky's advice and live every day to its fullest. For who knows, perhaps we too will be lucky enough to become accidental pieces of history. Ordinary people given extraordinary moments to do what is right and what is good. So yes, we called him lucky, but in the end, it is we who are lucky. Lucky to know him, lucky to inherit his story, lucky to live in the freedom that his generation preserved. John Lucky Luckadoo completed his final mission to the background noise of B-17 engines and is flown to bluer skies, ceiling and visibility unlimited. But the lift of his life remains, and that is our blessing, our gift, our luck. Will you pray with me? Almighty God, we thank you for John Lucky Luckadoo, a man called lucky, yet whose life reminds us that true blessing is more than chance. We thank you for the courage that carried him, the love that surrounded him, and the generations who followed him, who carry his legacy in their lives. And we thank you that his story, shaped by a short season of combat, became a lifetime of witness, teaching us that even brief moments of sacrifice can mark eternity. Now, Lord, we commend John Lucky Luckadoo into your care. Grant him everlasting peace, reunion with those he loved who went on before him, and eternal joy. And keep us faithful, that we might live with the same courage, the same humility, and the same hope. In your name we pray. Amen. For nearly 2.5 centuries, our flag has flown over every continent and in every war. It has endured storms and fire, carried into battle by the men and women whose blood has been spilled to preserve the liberty for which it flies. From the beaches of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific, from Europe to Asia, Old Glory waved, refusing to surrender to tyranny, a symbol of hope in the darkest of hours. In World War II, when the world itself trembled, our flag advanced with those who would not yield. Among them, a young pilot named Major John Lucky Luckadoo. Today, in grateful tribute, we present a flag finally flown with the 350th Air Refueling Squadron, the very same squadron that carried Lucky on his final combat mission. For more than 8 decades, Lucky honored this flag with his life, his memory, and his voice. Today, this flag will honor him, an emblem of a grateful nation, entrusted to his family and carried with love into history.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's ceremony. Please rise in silence and remain standing for the playing of taps and the rendering of honors. And at the conclusion of taps, please join us in the lobby for a special toast to Lucky.